Hey, I am Mustafa Sharif. Thank you for listening to Urbanistica podcast. I'm looking forward this episode. It's gonna be really interesting. I have my guest Anna Richert from WWF Sweden, Worldwide Fund for Nature. We're gonna talk about One Planet Plate project. So excited about this, and I would love to welcome you, Anna, to Urbanistica podcast.
Hey, well, thank you. And I'm also really glad to be here speaking to you about this subject.
Thank you so much, Anna, for giving your time and soon knowledge, experience, and inspiration. How are you doing?
Well, it's as good as possible in these complicated days that we live in. I mean, uh, working from home and trying to manage, but I'm well and happy, and my family is too. So I'm good.
Yeah. Yes. And I see you have very beautiful paintings behind you.
Yeah, I'm sitting in my couch in my home.
That's amazing. Well, Anna, how would you like to introduce yourself and what are you passionate about?
Well, it's I, my title is food expert at WWF Sweden. So that's what I work with, and that's actually what I'm passionate about because I've been working with sustainable food systems ever since I graduated from the University of Agriculture in Sweden,
Wow.
and that's a couple of years by now.
Yes, so sustainable food, is it from start to the end or a specific moment
Yeah,
of the cycle?
yeah. So I've been working with the whole system from food production to actually the sanitation system and how to reuse sanitation products in agriculture. So you can say that I've been covering most parts of the system, and my focus right now is quite strong on consumption issues, how to transform consumption of food for a food system that will keep us within the planetary boundaries. So that is my current focus.
Yes, and that's why we have you here today in the podcast so we get as much knowledge as possible from you. But
Mm.
would you like to tell us more about the WWF and about the Swedish team?
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, WWF is one of the biggest conservation organizations and organizations that works with planet uh, us keeping within planetary boundaries in the world. It's a global organization, so we have offices in more than 100 countries, and WWF Sweden is an entity of its own. So we're about 120 people who are working out of Stockholm, and a couple of colleagues are also around the country, and our mission is to have a situation where people live in harmony with nature. It's people and nature, and we have a strong focus on the biodiversity and keeping, or rather halting the decline of biodiversity that's ongoing. And we also have a strong focus on climate and the footprint of our consumption.
Yeah, very interesting because many people associate WWF with the panda and with just taking care of the animals, but actually you're doing more than project that focusing on animals' welfare.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we started in 1961, and then the goal was to preserve wildlife. But since then, the organization has matured, and there is now a very strong realization that you cannot achieve those goals without working on wider aspects such as consumption issues, energy systems. Um, so, I mean, the organization contains everything from poaching to energy systems to forests to Arctic work to food.
Wow.
And
So it's very multidisciplinary
yeah,
people working within the
yeah,
organization.
yeah, yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So how would should we just start about one planet plate? How did it started?
Mm. Well, it started like this. We wanted to develop a concept where for eating that would keep us within the planetary boundaries and that you could eat today, which is already there, because we see today that food is one of the biggest drivers of environmental change, of land transformation, and of water use, of climate. So we needed to have to work on a plate, or to present a plate that was already there, that could already satisfy the needs of everybody on the planet. And we started working on this a couple of years ago, and it's been financed by the postcode lottery in Sweden, and we had quite a strong momentum, since we have been working on the consumption of food since 2012 actually. And the one plate gave us a focus, and it's been a really interesting concept to work with. I don't know where we should start.
I will try to guide through this interesting conversation. But is it a Swedish project or something internationally?
Yeah, that's a good question. It is a concept coming out of WWF Sweden. So we have launched it in Sweden, and we're presenting it to my colleagues abroad, and it's starting to catch on, but it's also very different how the different WWF offices work with food. So for now it's in Sweden.
And who's the stakeholders or part of this project in Sweden?
Well, we in WWF Sweden developed it, and it contains two parts. It's directed towards restaurants and restaurants and public kitchens, and to people cooking in the homes. So we have been cooperating with a couple of restaurants along the way, but we're spreading it on a wider scale.
Yeah, and when you tell the public restaurants, you mean like schools, restaurants, and so on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the thing is that basically you tell that use this plate that of food that already exists on this planet, and you don't need to produce more
Exactly.
that kind of foods, right?
Exactly. Well, the point is to avoid that expansion of land into wildlife areas, and to get us humans to eat food with a lower climate impact.
Yeah. And if I imagine like now I have a plate, so what is the sustainable food that could be on this plate?
Well, a quite strong analysis is that we today eat more meat than is necessary on a general level. I mean,
Yeah.
it's consumers are not homogenic. It's a very heterogenic group. So some of us eat less meat, some of us eat more meat. But we we see that there's a need to eat more plant-based. Absolutely not all plant-based, because we need animals in the systems, but we see a need for more plant-based eating. So that's one plate has a quite strong focus on getting more plants into the food consumption.
And it's more because of the impact that this food cost, CO2 impact, or it's because of the healthy point of view?
Well, from our point of view, it has to be about the impacts on the planet. But we have been really careful to cooperate with health and nutrition experts, because we are not nutrition experts, but we have had them calculate our menus and support us so that we don't say something wrong. So
Yeah.
we're going hand in hand with nutrition.
That's amazing. And talking about the CO2 emission, do we know how much each product costs?
Mhm.
Like a potato or 1 kilogram of meat?
Mm. Yeah, well, there are databases for this. So there are figures for different meat products, for example, and for different vegetable products. And this is what we have been basing our calculations on, that we are calculating the climate impact of the products on the plate. Now, I want to raise a bit of a careful finger here, saying that climate figures, it's difficult. They contain a lot of uncertainty. I mean, it's not like you can have 5 decimals in a figure. Uh, they point the direction, and they're quite general, and they are also under debate. So this is like an indication of where we want food to go. so you can't really go too far in the numbers. Not yet. This is
Yet,
a
yeah.
developing area. It's maturing, as I said
Mm.
before, and the research is growing, so we know more and more. And above all, we know in general what the figures tell us, and that is that we need to go towards more plant-based. We need to lower the transports of mainly vegetables and fruit and things like that.
Mm.
But
Mm.
transports we don't go into. But I'll tell you a bit more about the plate in a minute.
Of course, of course. So I'm now thinking that this project is more like suggest how the plate could be,
Mm,
like we are in a kind of consumption phase,
mm.
right? How about the production? Do you deal with it as well, or not really in this project?
Not really in this project at all, actually.
Mm.
So that's something that I've actually been working with in my past professional life, that to get farmers to be more climate smart and more climate smart production. So this needs to happen too. But we, in the One Planet Play project, we come in from a cooking
Yeah,
perspective.
yeah. When it's time to
Uh-huh.
to eat.
Yep.
Well, what should we? Maybe should is not the perfect word, or what do you recommend to have on the plate, or what does this plate contain?
Well, it's a largely plant-based plate, so we need to look at more proteins from the plant kingdom, and we need to look at more uh, fibrous carbohydrates and fibers in vegetables. And we made weekly menus. I mean, we landed in climate figure for a meal, but we also made weekly menus and checked that we would be able to fit all the pleasures in life into such a menu.
Yeah,
So we see that there is space for example, chocolate in the afternoon, or and breakfast that will make you feel happy and satisfied and will get you through the day. So we do see that there's no need to for pain. I mean, it's a healthy and it's a satisfying menu.
yeah. I'm also thinking because it's not really easy to change someone's mind, especially when it comes to food.
Mm,
For instance, like the country I'm coming from, we have meat a part of our culture and it's very strong.
mm,
So like I'm imagining myself now telling them, okay, do this. It's gonna be not, they will not really be welcoming this idea. So
mm,
how do you deal with this psychological way of like transforming the
mm-hmm,
mindset
mm-hmm,
toward more healthy and sustainable plate?
mm. Well, first of all, I want to say that we need to challenge the norm, uh, and uh, and also we need to discuss: is it really true that meat is at the center of every diet? Because I'm not exactly sure where you come from, but quite a lot of the meals that we eat that are plant-based are based on, for example, the beans, the hummus, the baba ganoush, the aubergines, and the, I mean, and you can also take a look at the Indian cooking, where meat does not play the centerpiece, but rather really tasty dishes that are based on plants. So we think that actually this can be easily changed if you play to people's perceptions of taste and color and the cooking,
Yeah.
enjoying cooking.
Yeah, I got you. It's more like about the creativity,
Yeah,
preparing the food and also in eating. The
yeah.
thing is that I'm from Iraq and there like through
Mm,
the history it was
mm,
difficult with the weather, so
mm,
we didn't have so many plants to grow up.
mm,
That's why it's not really introduced to our culture. But now
mm.
with the import and export, we have so many possibilities.
Yeah,
We see everything from all the world. So
yeah.
now, as you say, it's to challenge the norm and actually reflect and think what is
Hmm.
sustainable both
Hmm.
for me and for the
Yeah,
planet.
yeah. It's the same thing in Sweden. I mean, when you go into a food shop, you can essentially get things from all over the planet, and this everything is available. And that means that we have to reflect a bit. And we are also quite conscious that we don't want to put the whole burden of improving the food system on the consumers. We really need for the retailers, for the food shops, and for the restaurants to do their job in helping consumers and inspiring consumers. So the One Planet Plate, it's like an inspiration for those who want to know and want to develop and want to think about this. But it's not a prescription for
Yeah.
this is how everybody should eat.
Yes, of course, of course. And where do you think who has the taking should take the responsibility in this? Is the consumer, the producer, or the supply?
Mm. We have to help out everyone actually, because the retailers they're not going to be doing this if the consumers aren't aware and interested. So you have to build on a group of interested consumers that want to move things forward. And you also have to build on brave companies, brave retailers, and brave cities that want to work on the school food, for example. That has been a strong momentum here in Sweden with the One Planet Plate, because the cities quite quickly caught on. So there are a number of them that are now setting targets according to the One Planet Plate, which is really, really interesting. So, in answer to your question, I would say that we all need to do our job, really.
Exactly. It's always end up like the co-thinking and co-collaboration that we all together need to reflect, and it's not really someone should take the responsibility because it's
Mm,
like we are in the loop together.
mm, mm.
And this is very interesting about schools. Do you believe that the new generation is easier to adapt to a sustainable plate?
Well, that's a really interesting question, because we can see a number of trends when it comes to young people's eating. We can see that there's less and less of this eating regular meals with in the family. Um, Food is more eaten on the go, and we're also getting an increasing problem with overweight and obesity, which has to do with food and with the exercise. So it's a complicated space, but we are going into a big project with WWF on sustainable eating, focusing on young people, sustainable diets, and it's called Eat for Change.
Wow,
So we're going to be working on this for a number of years now.
that's gonna be super interesting.
Yeah, it's all
What?
over Europe. It's a European finance project.
Wow, it's a mega project.
Yeah.
What is your expectation of the young people?
Well, I would really like young people and people in general to have a more how do you say mindfulness when it comes to eating, because what we need now is for people uh, to make conscious choices when it comes to food, and to realize that food has an impact. So it really matters what you put on your plate. And that's why I mean, the One Planet Plate, it's a concept that really catches on. You need to eat so that we can stay within the one planet. And this is something that we're going to be communicating to young people and in this project that I mentioned to you about.
Yeah, and it's also really cool because you're developing it really in a creative way that we can calculate the CO2 and the
Hmm.
calories. It's very interesting. I
Mm,
really like it, and
mm.
it's all on the home page.
Yeah.
I'm thinking we mentioned before the farming and the production.
Hmm.
You were mentioning like in your previous job, you were like telling about the smart farming. What
Mm.
is it about? Like, is it about using material or not farming so too much, so we get a lot of food wasted?
Well, I mean, farming that I mean, many kids also don't realize that food comes from a farm or from a fishery. So we need to really reconnect to the farms, and farmers are working now on getting more environmentally friendly production systems, but but this is quite difficult. Here we also need a political dimension, In the European Union, for example, the Common Agricultural Policy directs us to a more sustainable farming. Hopefully, we're working on that. But what I wanted to come in to here is also the biodiversity aspects, because we have been onto the climate aspects of One Planet Plate. So that's 0.5 kilo of carbon dioxide equivalents per plate. That's a figure. Yeah? But we also need for the plate to be good for biodiversity, because food is a major driver of biodiversity loss in the world today. And so we need for food to be more biodiversity friendly, and that's where the farmer comes in. The farmer needs to do more to see that there's not a decline of bird and insects in the landscape, and that to work on the biodiversity aspects.
But I believe this costs so much for them, no? Or do we have any ideas about like how much it costs for them to get more sustainable?
Well, it's also a potential, because if the food system isn't more sustainable, then we won't be able to feed ourselves in the future. So this is a direction where we must go, and the farmers must go to, and so there is no other way. And this may mean that food may become a bit more expensive in the future. This is also something that we're seeing, and we are also thinking that there are smart things you can do in the diet. For example, if you eat less and better meat, that will help us get a better plate, and it will also help the planet. And uh, you can do it within the same economical framework for the consumer. So the budget for the plate can be the same, but you prioritize away from the meat and to more vegetables.
Yeah, so it's about understanding and prioritizing what is the best.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. And actually, after this episode, I'm going to have an episode about vertical farming in the
Mm-hmm,
cities.
mm-hmm.
So now I would love to ask about your opinion. What do you think about the vertical farming?
I well, this is interesting, because I'm actually a bit skeptical.
Tell me, tell me.
I don't think that well, there are quite a lot of claims that this will feed the world. Uh,
Yes.
yeah, and the only products that I really see coming out of these systems are high value herbs and lettuce. So they're not going to be able to produce what feeds us, the food that all the food that comes on our plate. So I would say that this is quite an energy intensive and quite a specific production that may work in some situations, but it's not going to feed the planet, and it's not a solution for all.
Mm.
It might be a smart way to use some uh, residual flow of heat, for example, to heat up a greenhouse. But it's quite technical, and it's quite in my point of view, it's not a future food system. It's one part, and maybe quite a small part of a future food system.
Yeah, I almost agree with you before I meet my
Yeah.
other guest, because like when I was studying in university, we like the many students were suggesting that urban farming, vertical farming is a part of the solution. But I was thinking like this will not really, we will not survive based on only the vertical farming. So as you mentioned, it's part of the game and maybe small part of the game because of the technical
Yeah.
systems that required.
When you speak about urban food systems, and we're also developing a work on this in WWF, because we're merging our work on cities and diets and food waste. So there's a lot of things to be said on the urban food systems. But I mean, for example, in cities like Kampala, where they support, I saw a figure of was it 40 or 60? I don't remember, but it's a substantial chunk of the food that is eaten in Kampala that's also produced in Kampala.
Wow.
But that's not the type of thing we're talking about with vertical farming. That's actually produced on the land by farmers within the city limits.
Exactly. Do you think in buildings and when we work with architecture we have like something called life cycle analysis?
Mm-hmm.
That about the material from production to the waste and recycling.
Mm.
Do we have something when it comes to food, like from the first moment production?
Absolutely. This is what we're based on when we get the figures for climate impact of food. So it's based on life cycle analysis for different food products. So that exists in the food system as well as in the construction and the other systems.
Mm. Do we have a lot of food waste in Sweden?
Yes, we do. We have food waste in Sweden, and it's quite unnecessary. And this is a big agenda for us to get food waste out, to stop food waste. I mean, it's totally unnecessary, and I mean, I'm going to give you a figure. It's going to blow your mind. Do you know how many cups of coffee that are poured out into the drain in Sweden every year?
10,000?
420, 425 million cups of coffee.
No. Oh.
Yeah. And this is coffee that's being produced by somebody. It's deeply unethical, this food waste that's going on. And it goes to the sewage system and is lost. So that, I mean, it's just an example of what's happening, and you can easily see it for yourself in the kitchen when you go make coffee, and there's a little bit left in the pan, and you throw it out because it gets cold, or
Or you forget it.
yeah, yeah. So this is a big agenda for the planet, is to lower the food waste also.
But how do we actually change this mindset? Okay, you're giving a lot of information and education, but
Mm.
do you think we need more action to
Yes,
change the mindset? And what kind of action?
yeah. This is the big issue, because what I'm telling you now is not news at all. It's been, I mean, I remember since the 1970s when I bought my first cookbook and was started getting engaged in the planet. It says the same thing in the cookbook. Eat less meat, be more pulses and beans. Don't throw away food. So we have known this for a long time, and the issue of how to transform into action, that is the biggest issue that we can that I can see. And I think this is also a maturing area where we're getting into behavioral economics, how to look at behavior of people, how to change behavior. And I still think that inspiration and leadership is what's going to get us through this. And leadership when it comes to companies, to cities, to influencers that actually show the way and help people who are not engaged and not aware to be more aware and to show that change is not something that's difficult or bad or gets worse. It's inspiring and fun and challenging.
Mm. Do you think we are doing it now, or at least trying to influence?
Absolutely. It's absolutely ongoing. And I think this is a big potential also for leaders who want to to be
Unique,
the
or
future leaders
yes,
is to take on this subject. So
mm,
I would really encourage strong leadership from companies and from cities.
yeah. And the future leadership's gonna be in the future cities. What is your imagination about the future smart cities?
Well, I come in with the food perspective, and I think that we've been into some of these areas. I mean, food waste, and to connect this to a recirculation uh, uh, and a circular economy is a really big potential. So I think the cities need to take a grasp of their food systems, of what comes into the system, into the city, and what goes out of the city. So today, food is a one-way flow. It comes into the city and then it becomes waste. It becomes wastewater and sewage. And this is not really recirculated in a smart way. So we need to have a more of a circular economy think from the cities. And that is, from my point, smart. And it's also smart for the cities to connect the issue of healthy urban lifestyles. So we need to see for the cities to help their citizens to become more healthy, both when it comes to food, to movement, and to connect the food and the healthy bodies. Because this is quite interesting when it comes to food guidelines. I mean, what you eat is also depending on how much you move and how much you
Yeah,
your body needs.
exactly.
So to stimulate people to move and to be healthy,
Mm.
I think that's a big potential.
Yeah, and this is actually very interesting from my point of view, like from urban planning. Now
Mm,
we have density, you have everything close to you, so you
mm,
don't really need to move far away to get something you need.
mm,
So I'm thinking like less movement and so much food, it causes like equal unhealthy body.
mm,
So it's very, very interesting.
mm.
Do you believe that's gonna be like a recipe for people living in density, people living in suburbs, people living in countrysides?
Yeah, potentially. And I would like to see more diversified food guidelines, for example. And I would like to see also a perspective where you stimulate uh, with urban planning. Um, and now we could sort of move away from the food issue, but I mean, I'm a passionate biker. So I think that biking in the city should be much easier. And I mean, in many cities and even in Stockholm, it's quite a dangerous thing to do to bike. But I mean, this is I'm also a passionate eater. I love to eat food and cook food. So I mean, when I bike a lot, I can eat more food.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because your body need more calories
yeah,
too.
yeah.
Very interesting. So smart city is more about having a recycled economy that putting
Mm,
in loop everything, so not
mm,
so much really wasted food.
yeah.
But there's always should be someone who need to take the action. Of
Mm.
course, we all together should be part of this journey, but who is the main responsible to introduce this kind of system in the cities?
This is really interesting also because we have been working with this one planet plate, and the people who catch on really quickly are the school food professionals. So they and in the municipalities in Sweden where they have procurement and planning of school foods. So we come in from how do you say bottom up perspective. Uh, but there's also a top-down perspective where you have the top leadership in the cities that are also realizing that they need to set goals and by setting goals, then enable work to trickle down in the municipalities. So it's like coming from two ways.
Mm,
Uh, and I see that the both of these ways are important. I would really like for more cities to set ambitious goals
yeah.
when it comes to food,
Mm,
and to realize that food is I mean it's one of the big transfer things that is transforming our planet today.
yeah. Yeah.
And so for the high level goal setting and engagement, and also enabling of the work among the food professionals in the municipalities, all the way out to teaching school cooks how to cook better vegetarian food. Because when I was a kid, vegetarian food in the schools was awful. It was like a limp broccoli in a cheese sauce, and but now you can get vegetarian school food that is top-notch quality, and so
Yeah. Yeah.
in many schools, but not in all schools. So
Yeah.
it has to come down to all the way down to how to teach school cooks how to cook better food so that the kids will eat it and will choose it before the meat,
Yeah.
even if it's vegetarian.
Yeah. Very interesting. So there is a need of action on different scale, the big scale and even the small details from the preparing the food.
Yes,
Very
yes.
interesting. Anna, what is the next step of this project?
Well, the one planet plate needs to be spread. So we're in a communication phase. We're trying to get more restaurants to use it. We're trying to get more cities involved in target setting. and we are getting. We're also actually revising the criteria to see if we are still. If we still to see to it that we still have a top-notch system. So we are both in a work phase internally on the criteria revision, but I think mainly now we need to spread the word, and that's partly why I wanted to be here with you and talking about this, because we need more people to use this concept. We need more cities to focus on climate smart and biodiversity friendly food, and we need more cooks to be aware of this.
And I'm very grateful that you gave us your time to be part of this podcast, because I'm also trying, this podcast is to change the mindset of people who actually work directly and also indirectly with city development, because we don't have more time to wait. It's time, and there is already people like you trying to help us and change for a better future. So why not we go together on this? Well, Anna, it was so inspirational to talk to you. I'm very inspired. If I might ask you, how would you like to summarize your reflection and our talks in 3 takeaway messages to people who are listening to you?
Well, I'm just happy that you want to spend the time listening. To everybody who's out there, I want to say go out and enjoy cooking and enjoy eating meals together, because I think this is going to be really important for us in the future with the situation in the world. We need to eat food together and have the meal as a collective, something that collects people. You can gather around a table, eat food, and discuss. And this, I think, this is like a, a basis for transformation. Not to eat food on the go, but to use the meal as a transforming agent. So that's one thing. The second thing, of course, is don't be afraid of this plant-based. Plant-based, less but better meat is the future. And the third thing I think we touched upon also is remember not to throw away food. Challenge yourself. Don't to have try a week without throwing away a single thing. Isn't that? I mean,
That's
just
amazing
look
challenge.
at what you're
That's a
doing
really
in a
great
week.
challenge. Yeah, yeah. I will try this definitely directly already now.
Mm,
Well, Anna, thank you so much. Oh, before we finish, I need 3 hashtags from you.
mhm. Okay. Well, the first one's easy. That's one planet plate. Yeah. And the second one, I think, should be less and better meat.
Yes.
And the third one should be, and this is one that I use quite a lot, mostly on Twitter, where I spend quite a lot of time, is win-win. Because I believe that we need to look at solutions that are win-win for both of us. I mean, you can't look at a solution where I achieve my goal, but you don't achieve your goal.
Yeah,
So win-win solutions.
definitely. Thank you so much, Anna, for everything, and hopefully we do one more podcast about other projects that you work with in WWF Sweden.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for listening to Urbanistica podcast. I encourage you to go to your Google and just search for one planet plate and look for the different information, recipe, and also calculate your plate. Don't forget to follow on Instagram and subscribe the YouTube channel. I am Mustafa Sharif. Thank you for listening to Urbanistica podcast.